This is the newest piece of equipment in CrossFit Burke's lineup. This is the PR platform from Mike Bardos's Powercenter. Makes some very high quality equipment. I'm going to take this blog to show you a few of the things this can do and what you can do on it. Starting out by pointing out some of the attachment points for the bands. You can do all sorts of banded deadlifts at different levels. These are ground anchors. Okay. You have variable heights, and I'll show you different ways you can attach the bands to these things. You also have 3 front banded anchor attachments for some front banded deadlifts. We also have these bars here, crossbars, that you can set to any height and do rack pulls or static pulls, and we'll go over some of these things next. Alright, starting with the bottom band attachments, you'd want to use light bands for this, but it's very good at building acceleration through deadlifts. Go ahead and show a couple deadlifts there, John. So all the way up. He's going for speed off the floor, so it's a very good way to do your speed drills, because bands, it's not just accommodating resistance, it does get more difficult the closer to lockout you get, but it also adds an acceleration component into your training, so it's good for teaching yourself to accelerate through the motion. I found that you can also use this for clean pulls. The same sort of idea. Very good for building power in your pull. You can also use it for snatch pulls pretty effectively. Notice for all of the things we're doing today, we're using the short bands. This is not a platform that requires long bands. Thank you very much, John.
Okay. All right.
Before I go on to all those different variations, I want to quickly talk about how to actually take bands off of this thing and put them on correctly. Notice this is kind of a sharp edge right here. You don't want to pull the band off so that it's rubbing over that edge. You really got to put a lot of strength to it and make sure you're clearing that thing entirely. And all of the band pegs are the same way. I'm making a point to make this add this little section to the video, because one of our athletes last week actually shredded 2 of these bands already by doing exactly what I'm going to show you what not to do. So get a good anchor. Feet are on either sides of this thing, because this is not screwed into the floor. Part of the beauty of this thing is you can move it around and it's still going to work no matter where you go, because you're standing on this platform in the middle that's holding it down. But because of that, when you're actually taking the bands off and stuff, if I start lifting on it, the whole thing's going to come up. So you got to make sure that you're leveraging off of the platform itself. So I get here, I grab far enough back so I can get some slack into it. I really go all the way around that sharp edge. Okay, I'm not going to just be lazy and scrape it over that thing, because again, all it takes is once to destroy a good set of bands. So another thing you can do using this device, say you want to work on speed work, do some speed pulls for your deadlift, but you also know that you have a horrible lockout, or maybe you do a lot of hitching and you want to clean it up. You can do something called stacking your bands. So we still have this bottom band on, that light band that's going to promote that acceleration through the lift, but you can analyze your lift. Say you know you start hitching when you get just above the knee, which is my case, or maybe you know you have a hard sticking point just below the knee. You can set the band to the correct height. This is a very heavy band. This adds a lot of weight at the top of the movement. So you're going to want to use this one for higher end lockout work. But a quick example of that setup, still doing speed pulls, but it's going to give you a little extra motivation to blast through that sticking point, and it's going to give you a lot more resistance to fight at the top when you're strongest. So again, still getting that bottom band on there, have this top band as well, so having to accelerate to that top band and then put a lot of extra effort in towards the top. This is a way of kind of teaching your nervous system how to pull with acceleration. Again, these bands, even though it is adding a form of accommodating resistance, that means the higher you get up in your lift, the stronger you are, the more resistance is adding. So you're kind of taking advantage of that added strength as you lock out. But if you look at the F equals ma, equation, force equals mass times acceleration. When you're adding chains, that's another form of accommodating resistance. You're adding mass, so the higher you get, the heavier it becomes. When you're adding bands, you're actually adding acceleration into that relationship. So bands will actually pull that weight down faster to the ground than gravity will alone. And you can use that for a lot of speed drills, a lot of speed training, and just generally learning how to accelerate the bar. If you notice when somebody jumps, say they take like a drop step and then they jump, that little dip, or if you're doing like a hang power clean, starting at the top, dipping down, coming back up, there's something called an amortization phase associated with that movement. So the time it takes between going down and coming back up, you can actually shorten that by doing banded drills, because when you learn how to kind of fight through that added acceleration component, then you take the bands off, all of a sudden you're just way faster, way more powerful in any of your counter movement activities. So again, like hang power cleans or drop step jumps, things like that. There's also a couple studies that show that doing that sort of training helps your progress and moves with a static start. So say you're doing like a seated box jump where you don't get that chance to do a dip before you jump up. This sort of training actually carries over to that more so than the other way around. So like they always say, you're better off kind of introducing some sort of a stretch shorten cycle into whatever movement you're doing. But then again, you still need to have that static start work just so you can develop the technique required to employ the power you're developing. I'm going to quickly go through and just show you a whole bunch of different variations. All right, so one setup I'm finding works really well for increasing pull strength off the ground. So say you usually get stuck on the ground, but if you can get it off the ground, you can usually lock it out. This is a good way to fix that sticking point. So notice, I only have about, just a little bit of space in between that bottom peg and the band, but it's going to come up about an inch. So what I would recommend is actually using plates. You can just stick some plates inside this thing that bring it up about an inch, so that it's actually pretty close to where you'd be level if you're pulling from the ground. And what you're doing is you can put some heavy bands on for this, just so you don't have to put a ton of weight on the bar. You're already pretty much there. You're going to pull real hard off the ground. Maybe do like a 6 to 12 minute EMOM or so, where you're just pulling hard into that rail for 6 seconds, even though it's not going to go anywhere, and then immediately going back down. Do that again like once a minute for 6 to 12 minutes or so. I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like here in a second, but you would work up to a weight that you feel like you could be in control of. You don't want it to be so heavy that you can't actually last that 6 seconds, or you're even questioning your ability to. But you do want to get kind of as close to your max as you can. Again, this is a good drill for building floor strength, pulling off the floor. I'm just going to pull hard and pull. And you can do that on the minute, working up and weight. Now you have lots of different pegs for height where you can put this bar. So if you're doing statics like I just showed you, you can actually just kind of analyze your pattern again, see where you've got some sort of sticking point on the way up to lockout, and just set that bar as close to it as you can, so you can teach yourself how to build a lot of tension through that sticking point and grind through it if you need to. Now on the opposite side, you can use those pins to do rack pulls. Now you could take the band off and just do regular rack pulls, work on your limited range strength, or you could throw a band on if you want to work on your lockout. Again, this would be more of a isolation lockout, so you're not able to build any momentum off the ground before you get to your lockout. So this is a good way of kind of enforcing strictness and teaching yourself how to grind through your lockout with good form, rather than just relying on momentum off the ground. So maybe you have a really strong first pull, but you just struggle when you get to lockout. You might want to throw some of this in. Now, just like with any of the things I'm showing you right now, you could do this with the maximal effort method, meaning you're just working up to the heaviest weight you can handle for like 1 to 3 reps. You do the repetition method, we're just trying to build some muscle, 8 to 12 range or so, maybe 5 to 12 range or so, maybe up to 15. We could also do speed sets here. I wouldn't recommend really speed sets with this setup, because speed is more about getting that full pull as fast as you can. And again, this setup is more about learning how to grind through that last little bit. I'm going to show you a lot more variations here in a second. Moving on to front banded deadlifts, I'm going to show you kind of a hybrid that I found that's pretty similar to a front banded deadlift, but it has a little bit more of a lockout focus instead. So these front attachments again are for front banded deadlifts. This is a deadlift variation that really gets your lats into the mix a lot more, because you're having to fight the bar back a lot on the entire way up. You don't even really notice it because the weight usually kind of, you're focusing on completing the lift so much that you don't realize that you are engaging your lats a lot more. But as soon as you finish the set, you're like, man, feeling my lats all of a sudden. Really good for working upper back, really good for working lockout. Get your hamstrings into the mix a little bit more too, because it takes a little bit more hip extension to get your hips forward. I'll show you a couple reps of this, and then after that, I was playing around and I actually found that if you anchor with a slant on some heavier bands, say I'm doing lockout work, but I have, you know, the back band up, or the back of the band up here, and then I put a slant in, so I'm either down here or down here. That little bit of a diagonal shift has the same effect, or no, you want to go the other way, sorry. So that little bit of a diagonal shift has the same effect in kind of pushing the bar forward. It's not nearly as noticeable as this, but it does give you that same feeling in your lats, and it maintains a lot of the upward force you have to put into the bar as well. I feel like it kind of saves your groove a little bit better than a pure front banded deadlift. Front banded deadlift can feel like a little too much not like a deadlift. So you're kind of maintaining that same groove, and you're still getting that effect of having to get your lats involved into the mix, really get your chest back into your lockout. I'll show you a few of these, and then I'll show you an older video I did using the band configuration I'm talking about. Really focusing on keeping that bar close to you. So if you have somebody who, even though you're telling them keep the bar close on the way up, keep the bar close, tends to come forward on them, so make the lift a lot harder for them. This will fix that very quickly. Next variation I'm going to show you again, that was an older video. I'm actually going to be doing demo deadlifts with that slant in the band. Again, that slant does a very mild effect of what this does, kind of pushes the bar forward, so you have to focus on leaning into your lockout a little bit more. I'm using it with an exercise called a demo deadlift. So earlier in this video, I was talking about the importance of using exercises with a stretch shorten cycle. Some examples of this for the deadlift would be like a touch and go deadlift where you're not really even unloading on the ground, just tapping, coming back up, or a Romanian deadlift where you're not going all the way down, just kind of bouncing out of your hamstrings, or a demo deadlift, which is just really it's a faster Romanian deadlift that really focuses on that lockout strength, really popping your hips forward into the bar. I started doing those demo deadlifts with that slant, so not only am I, locking out against the band, but I'm also having to pull back a little bit. And I noticed that I gained a lot of strength on my deadlift pretty quickly, and on my Olympic lifts, on my power variants. But I also noticed that my squat is feeling a lot easier from throwing those into the mix. But I'll cut that into the video right now, and then I'm going to go back and show you a couple more things you can do with this.
I heard a lot of people that got dizzy. I heard a lot of people that got dizzy. I thought I was going to die for a little bit, but... Yeah, do a good bar.
Really, part of the sheer beauty of this thing is the fact that the sky is the limit. I mean, you can think of all sorts of different variations to do on this. Now, that's really handy because you can really specifically target weak points. But in the maximal effort method, you're really just kind of trying to find lots of variations, lots of ways of doing the same thing so that the pattern is still similar enough to transfer into your deadlift or your clean pull or whatever it is you're trying to do. Here's an example of something that's kind of a little wacky, but it's something that I would have a hard time imitating without this device, this PR platform from Mike Bardos. So there's something called a unloaded deadlift. So this time the band is actually helping the bar up, but then notice that other band is right there, so it's actually slowing it back down once you get close to lockout. So it's kind of a way of easily getting to your lockout and then really focusing on it from there up. I'll show you a couple of reps of this, but this is, like I said, this is something I've never even really seen before. Haven't really tried it long enough to know what kind of training effect it would have, but it is just another deadlift variation, so it's something you could throw in on a max effort day just to keep things fresh. All right, guys, so again, there it is, the PR platform from Mike Bardos Powercenter. Again, it's like you just saw a very few of the variations you can do on this thing, but it's not just the fact that you can do all these variations, but the fact that you can actually combine variations and all sorts of hybrid movements. It's just the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better off you're going to be. And this is a lot of them right here in one frame. Again, you can combine static pulls with banded pulls. You can do stacked bands. You can do any kind of leveraging you want by angling your bands. Combine front pulls with lockout work, front pulls with rack pulls, front banded work with statics. Really, the sky's the limit. I mean, you can just kind of put this thing together any way you want and go for it. And that's probably a good method to just keep getting stronger too. It's just, even if all you did was like max out on this thing a different way every time you used it, I'm sure that would get you a little bit of progress. But there it is, guys. I'll be around if you have any more questions, and I'll be adding a little bit more to this in terms of training strategies you can use this for. But that was just kind of show you what this thing is, that weird thing in the back that people were thinking was a grill or a litter box or a coat rack or a place to hang your purse. But I'll get back to you later with some more ideas. Thanks.